You cannot love something without hating on it. So I've made fun of the Times. I made fun of our own paper. I make fun of myself. I'll make fun of myself right now. That's the last time you're going to ever hear my name alongside Joaquin Castro and Diana Taurasi, who are legends, absolute legends of what they do. And now me, what the fuck? I cannot believe it.
Welcome to the Latino Excellence Podcast with Los Angeles Times columnist Gustavo Arellano. Gustavo, what a week we've just had. What a pleasure. We've been talking about this for a while, trying to get you on this podcast. You exemplify Latino excellence. You know, I'm from LA, you're from Orange County. You are at the epicenter of what everybody's talking about right now, especially in the Latino community. How's it going, bro? And congratulations on having not been rounded up.
Not yet, right? But look, that's a scary thing though, because people keep telling me, watch yourself. First and foremost, law enforcement is predisposed to hate the press, no matter, even on something as simple as just calling them about like a murder or whatever. They just do not want to bother with the press. But especially at times like this, like, yeah, it could get very dicey very quickly. I'm not going to claim that I'm like under target because of who I am or whatever, but as a reporter, we do have to be a little bit more careful than other folks being out there, you know?
Well, yeah. And, you know, we are both here. You know, I've had a long newspaper career, journalism career. You've had a long, distinguished journalism career. And we're both here in many ways because of Rubén Salazar. So I don't want to talk about that image too much, but, you know, the Chicano moratorium. So we know, like, sometimes they do target us or sometimes they accidentally hit us, allegedly.
Yeah, no,
right?
The legendary Rubén Salazar, my predecessor as a columnist that happens to be Latino for the Los Angeles Times, got killed. A tear gas canister split his head open during the Chicano moratorium, a big protest that turned into a beatdown by law enforcement against Chicano activists in 1970. May he rest in peace. All of us who follow in his footsteps, like, our job is to tell the truth no matter what the truth may be and no matter how much harassment you may get, like Rubén got toward the end of his life confirmed. And then of course a lot of people have spun nefarious conspiracies around him. All we know is that, again, LA sheriff's deputy fired a tear gas canister into a bar in East LA where Rubén was trying to get from all the tear gas, killed him instantly.
Yeah, I think August 29th, 1970. Was it the Silver Dollar Cantina, right?
Yeah. It's now like, I think a smoke shop or some shit like that. I don't know. Like, it is no longer a cantina, alas.
Well, when we talk about, you know, we've had Joaquin Castro on here. We have Diana Taurasi, softball superstar, Maya Perez from Texas A&M. We've had a lot of people making a difference, people speaking out. I have to congratulate you on becoming a finalist for the Pulitzer. Like, you obviously want to win it, but that's a tremendous honor. That's a rare honor for a Latino columnist. And as someone who has been a columnist at one point, one of only two lead Latino sports columnists in America, I get it. Not many of us get that opportunity. You know, I've been a big fan of yours. I still remember the drunk night we had when I was telling you how I loved your book. And I think it was in San Jose, right? The NH Shake.
Yeah. I got thrown down. I got thrown down the staircase because Buffalo Trace was giving out free bourbon and I had one too many. So I literally got thrown down by security. Legendary night. You did not get drunk as much as I did, but we had a lot of fun.
You know, as I told you that day, like, what you do is so important. And, you know, the logo that shall not be used again, but your old column and the famous SIG with the, oh my Lord, exaggerated Mexican look, right? Like
the bandito.
How have you grown as a columnist to, you know, like the LA Times? You're at the LA Times, a place that maybe in the past you would have ridiculed?
I have always read the LA Times, and of course, you cannot love something without hating on it. So I've made fun of the Times. I made fun of our own paper. I make fun of myself. I'll make fun of myself right now. That's the last time you're gonna ever hear my name alongside Joaquin Castro and Diana Taurisi, who are legends, absolute legends in what they do. And now me, what the fuck? I cannot believe it. But in terms, look, of how have I grown as a columnist, ask a Mexican, just in case people have never heard of it, which I never assume people do, but I never assume people know anything about me at all. But it was a column that I did from 2004 to 2017 in alternative news weeklies around the country, but based in the newspaper that I ended up editing, OC Weekly. And it was exactly what it sounded like. People would send me questions about Mexicans and I would answer them. And it was rude and it was crude, but it was in your face. It was done at a time where, like right now, people were assuming that Mexicans were nothing more than invaders and we weren't any better than that. And I was going to say no, or I said no, we are more. We are humans. We are as Americans, if not more so. I ended up leaving that column because not by my choice. I've been an LA Times columnist now. This fall will be 5 years. So just by virtue of me writing for the Times, it's completely different. Ask a Mexican, let me be crude and use a bunch of bad words. The worst bad word I could use in my current column with the LA Times, pendejo, which thankfully now is so accepted in Southern California that no one even flinches when I say that. Also not satirical. I mean, I could be funny in it. I'm allowed to try to be funny, but the purpose of this column is really to tell the stories of who we were, who we are, and who we're becoming as Californians. So I don't just tell the stories. I don't just go out there, talk to people, tell you this is what's happening right now. I'm always looking to the past. I'm always looking to the future. And I'm always looking all across Southern California. So yeah, it's its own thing. And I never thought I would be that type of columnist because when I was at OC Weekly, I was also doing a bunch of other things. But being a Metro reporter is absolutely incredible. Very few people have very few people are ever able to get their dream job. I'm now lucky where I've had 2 dream jobs. Like I've really lived a blessed life.
And you have had a great career, but it takes a lot of work. You don't luck into it. You're very talented. I love the fact that you're a junior college guy who then went to UCLA, and now you're teaching at a junior college. And a lot of people, especially our gente, like either because of economics, they can't go straight to like a UCLA or a Texas A&M. They do the Long Beach City College soccer route,
Yeah.
as I
OCC.
did, and but where did you learn to be a writer? Where did you develop that love of writing?
I have no idea, but probably it's because I first developed a love of reading. I don't know if the video of this podcast is going to be on, but in case like on YouTube or whatever, but in case it is, like people could see behind me, I am surrounded by books. There's books in front of me, books to my side. There's a Mexican style calendar there that's shielding more books all around. So from a young age, I just wanted to know everything about the world, everything except math. I don't like math. But just as much about history, as much about people. Some used to like fiction more when I was younger, not as much anymore, but just as much reading as possible. So I guess that developed into, above all, I like to know stories and know facts. That I guess developed into me having some sort of skill as a writer. And I say that not to not to try to be fake humble, but it's true. I would always get A's on my essays. I'd always have teachers tell me, you could be a writer, a poet, book writing, whatever. And I was very bad in high school. I'm barely graduated from high school because of math kept messing me up. And even to this day, people say, "Oh, you could aspire." I think it's funny that this is all about Latino excellence because I never strive for excellence. In fact, I always run away from excellence, and I was saying like, I don't need that. So in high school, I would my teachers would tell me like, "You could be a writer." I'm like, who cares? I don't want to be a writer. I just want to hang out with my friends. And here we are, 30-some years later. That's kind of still like one of the big critiques that my awesome bosses always have is like, you should do bigger projects. You should look big. I'm like, nah, I like doing small things, but in that sense, just reading a lot, eventually got to community college. I was originally a film major, so learned how to do screenwriting. That really wasn't my thing because I quickly discovered journalism, and I realized like journalism, being at OC Weekly in the early 2000s, that was my writing school. I learned how to write from great people. I learned what makes a story. And I also learned to tell stories that matter. Like the example that I always use, this is a very Orange County example, so I'll use it. So, but I'll explain it. Why, and this is something I would always tell my writers when I was an editor, why should someone in San Clemente, a city at the very end of South Orange County, right across the border from Camp Pendleton, beach city, very conservative, why should mostly white, why should someone in San Clemente care about a story that happens in La Habra, all the way in northern Orange County, very Mexican, its own 562 area code, more culturally LA County than Orange County? So why should people from each city care about each other? And that's what I always try to ask myself when I do tell the stories that I do, is try to make yes, focused on whoever's reading that in particular, but really do it in a way that anyone could read it and everyone would be interested in what I have to say.
I tell you something that I envy about your job that I never had in St. Louis, and St. Louis and LA, nobody's going to ever compare those two cities. but one thing that you're an Orange County guy, LA is not parochial. LA invites the world to live there and celebrates the world. So an Orange County guy can write a column in LA. Whereas in St. Louis, I mean, they care where you went to high school.
Oh yeah, the famous high school.
They, it's so parochial that it was hard for people to accept that a guy from LA who came from Houston, who lived in New York, is now writing opinions about St. Louis teams, as if I couldn't see a team struggling and point out, hey, this draft was horrible or whatever. How has LA, from afar, it looks like they've embraced you. But how has LA embraced you, the community? I'm not talking about the sheriff who hates you, but the community embrace you as a Orange County guy who you're very open about, but writing about LA issues.
Oh, it's been funny. A lot of people in LA knew me because of my Ask a Mexican column, because of my book, Taco USA, How Mexican Food Conquered America, which came out in 2012. I've long championed Mexican restaurants in LA. I also run a tortilla tournament for KCRW, the NPR station out here. So of course I knew a lot about Los Angeles. So if people knew me at all in LA, for the most part, they liked me. But then I started writing about politics, and all of a sudden some people did not like me at all, because it's easy when you're writing about stuff like food, stereotypes. Oh yeah, you're cool. But then once you start questioning some of the sacred cows in a particular area, which is exactly what you went through when you were a columnist out there for the Post-Dispatch, people start getting mad at you, and people do question, well, what do you know? You're from Orange County. And especially LA has always looked down on Orange County. They think of us Mexicans in Orange County as somehow whitewashed, even though that just means they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Just go to Santana and tell me if it's whitewashed. And so early on when I started, because I became a columnist in 2020. It's interesting like how my career has gone, because starting in 2020, we're still going through the pandemic, and we're obviously the presidential race. So I was still writing a lot about COVID, and then wrote about Trump, especially when it came to Latinos and Trump. So 2021, that still takes me through a lot of the COVID era. I really don't start focusing on politics in LA until 2022, when I covered the ex-sheriff of Los Angeles, Alex Villanueva. And then, of course, everything changes when we have the racist audio leak scandal coming out from City Hall, where you had four of the most powerful political people in Los Angeles, all who happen to be Latino, some of them legends like Kevin De Leon and Gil Cedillo, talk trash about Black political power, make fun of Oaxaqueños, like just nasty, nasty stuff. Now, all of a sudden, I'm covering these things day in, day out, and people no longer like me anymore. That's when they start saying like, oh yeah, you're just from Orange County. The best compliment that I received was from somebody in the political realm in LA who said, oh, people are afraid of you because you ask tough questions. And I'm like, isn't that what you're supposed to do as a reporter? Ask questions. And that's the thing that I've found. It's like I really side with no one. And this is the same thing in Orange County. Even in Orange County, like now that I don't write about Orange County, you see way more people saying nice things about me than when I was there. I don't write for any community. The only community that I ultimately write for is the people who care about truth. If that means I have to expose Latinos for being horrible, that's what I'm going to do. But I stand for the good. I stand for the truthful, and I am opposed against evil and pendejos. And pendejos come in all languages and all looks and all skin tones and ethnicities and all that.
And you talk about being in LA, but your Pulitzer Prize finalist was about a trip where you went to try to explain the country, right? Latinos around the country. You didn't stay in LA. Can you tell us, for the people who haven't read it or have to go back and read it, tell us about that project. What was the idea? How long did it take you? And what stories columns within that project were you the most proud of?
Yeah, it was actually a compilation of different things that I had done throughout 2024, all under the umbrella of Latinos in a election year, with a presidential candidate who had been more anti-Latino than any presidential candidate probably ever. So I actually started with a history of Latino political power in Los Angeles. Like when we talk about politics in Los Angeles, people always think about Boyle Heights, East LA, and all that. But I actually did it in 4 parts, segmenting it. You had the East Side Machine, the San Fernando Valley, South LA, which is historical black heart of Los Angeles, but has been majority Latino now for over 30 years. And then your part of the world, CELA, Southeast Los Angeles County, which sadly has been associated with political corruption as Latinos have become the super majority there. So that was the first part of the series. And one of the articles that was cited in my Pulitzer finalist nod was a story about Alex Padilla, the U.S. Senator from California, who, of course, was tossed out of a press conference with Department of Homeland Security head, Kristi Noem, which, of course, has gone national. And just talking about how this mild-mannered MIT graduate created this machine that overtook the East Side in terms of influence. Then the other big package, the one that you referenced, it was called Caminos del Southwest. So it was funny because my bosses tell me, hey, Gustavo, can you go around the country and ask Latinos how they feel about Trump? I'm like, nah. Again, I don't want to be pushed into things. I have to come naturally. But for me, I've been covering Latinos and Trump now for 6 years. I'm frankly tired of the subject. I've been saying, by the way, that Latinos were going to move closer to Trump. And I got dismissed as like, oh, what do you know? That's not real Latinos. They're all sellouts. And of course, Trump increased his gain every single election until arguably Latinos swung the election for him in swing states, which is huge. But for that series, eventually, what I told my bosses is like, let me take a road trip, not the way you want me to, but I'm gonna tell stories about Latinos in the Southwest that I've been wanting to tell forever. And yeah, it's an election year, so we'll talk about politics, because how can you not talk about politics? So I ended up I went to the U.S.-Mexico border, saw the border wall for the embarrassment that it is. And by the way, it was continued under the Biden administration, so it's not just Trump. Went over to Clifton, Arizona, which is a copper town out there on the southeastern portion of Arizona, to see a big, huge mound of, they're called a shaving or no tailings, the trash, basically a trash heap of the mine, one of the largest copper mines in the world, to see where my grandmother was born. Went to El Paso to see the El Paso Walmart massacre. You ask me like, what are some of the proudest stories that I did from that trip? I have to say my proudest story was going to Antonito, Colorado, population 600 on the southeastern part of Colorado. That is the home to the oldest Latino civil rights group in the United States, the Sociedad Protección Mutua de Trabajadores Unidos, short for, or they call it short, La Mutua for short. And I just remember I met 3 people who are members of them, and they were just amazed that anyone outside, this is an organization that's older than LULAC, been going back since 1911. They were amazed that anyone from Southern California would even know about their existence. Most Latinos don't know about them, period. So going out there, it was just so wonderful to see them. But, I try to not predict things, but I try to call things out. So here you have 3 Latinos fighting against desegregation in Southern Colorado. They have ancestors. There's 7 generations there, so their ancestors have been there since like northern New Mexico or Southern Colorado since the 1500s. We're talking about old school, and not a single one of them would say they would vote for Harris. One guy said, "I'm probably not going to vote." Another person said, "I'm going to vote for a president, but it's not going to be Trump and it's not going to be Harris." And the other person wouldn't really commit. So that's when I knew, like, you better be careful, folks. Latinos are going to probably go for Trump in numbers you've never seen. Exactly what happened.
I'm sighing here because I see that sometimes we're no different. And I've known this. I tell people we are no different than white Americans. Latinos
No.
have their own biases, have their own, a lot of them vote for self-interest. My youngest daughter sighed the other day when I called to wish a friend a happy birthday, because this is a person who I have learned to care about over the last 20 years. We don't vote the same. We don't see Trump the same way. But my whole deal is like, if I cared about you for 20 years before I knew how you vote, I'm still going to care about you. And it might break my heart, and I don't know, like, it is what it is. But a lot of people who don't know us just assume that we're just a monolith, right? That, all Latinos think the same. And I'm like, no, like, all Mexicans don't think alike. We consider that we got the Puerto Ricans, the Dominicans, the Venezuelans, and the Cubans. And I think I joke that Venezuelans lately are now starting to see what it feels like to be Mexican in this country, because until these ICE raids, they were the ones being demonized for the last 8 months, right? Like, hey, like, welcome to Mexicanhood.
Yeah, which something is no one wants to do. No, look, Latinos, Reagan. This is attributed to Reagan, but he really didn't say it, which is Latinos are natural born Republicans. They just don't know it yet. I have been telling Republicans for decades that you could have had Latinos, majority of them voting Republican, if you didn't pursue your xenophobic bullshit. That's why an entire generation, your generation and my generation, I know you've been gone, but you're a little bit older than me, but still generally the same generation. That's why so many of us in California ended up becoming Democrats, because of Proposition 187, this 1994 ballot initiative that sought to make life miserable for undocumented immigrants. But and so you had an entire generation of people Latinos voting Democrat, but things change. Yeah, you're gonna stand up for undocumented people when it's your tío or tía or yourself. But when it's people from Oaxaca, more indigenous folks, you're not going to care as much. When it's people from Central America, you're really not going to care that much. And by the time now that the invading force is going to be Venezuelans, oh yeah, you're easily going to hate them, because you don't know Venezuelans at all. You only know them in the professional sports realm, and that's it. So that's why I tell people, like, there was a survey done last year that showed that the percentage of Latinos in California that are against illegal immigration, it's almost at the same level as white people during the Proposition 187 years. So basically now Latinos are thinking like white people used to think on illegal immigration, and white people's perception of illegal immigration, it is of people who are opposed to illegal immigrants, it's actually lower now than it ever has been. So it's like, in what world do white people become more sympathetic ultimately than Latinos in America, because that's what the United States is about.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't want to talk about my tia, who shall remain nameless, but who I warned my siblings about, like, literally when I was 16.
No, boy, even back then.
Yeah, the self-hate I see in her, we're just not going to mention her.
Sure.
But yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about politics, but one of the cool things that I love about you is that you love sports.
Oh, like, God, yeah.
Sometimes I wonder if you wish you were Dylan Hernandez and doing that stuff. And by the way, hat tip to Dylan Hernandez, who's been bringing the fire lately. His column this week on the Dodgers, his column on Jackie Robinson, Dylan's been on fire. So you're listening to the Latino Excellence Podcast with Los Angeles Times columnist Gustavo Arellano, Pulitzer Prize finalist, best-selling author, columnist. So let's talk about your love of sports, man. Sometimes it seems like you know more baseball than I do, and I've made my career covering baseball. who was your favorite baseball player? What's your favorite team? And why do you hate Clayton Kershaw?
I did not hate Clayton Kershaw. We'll get to that though. Favorite players growing up: Nolan Ryan, Ryan Sandberg, Ricky Henderson. Nolan Ryan, because of course he was a legend, like just Ryan Express, and remember him with the Astros. Then when he got to the Rangers, ya viejito, but still throwing that seventh no hitter. I have a box up there that has the not the front page, but the sports front page from the Orange County Register about his seventh no hitter. Of course, his beatdown of Robin Ventura. Ryan Sandberg, because I was a second baseman, a terrible second baseman, and Ryan Sandberg, of course, was the greatest second baseman of his generation. Ricky Henderson, because how could you not like Ricky Henderson, man? Just, my cousin's favorite team growing up before he became a full Dodgers fan was the A's. And so that was the A's, the Bash brothers, Dave Stewart, but Ricky Henderson was just stealing bases, talked about himself in the first person. Awesome. I have no favorite sports team. I mean, I used to love the Cubs forever, but then once they won the World Series, why do it anymore? That's why you love them. And then I got friends from the south side of Chicago and said, hey, you're not supposed to like the Cubs as a Mexican. That's a team for stockbrokers. So my favorite column, even though, I did get my Pulitzer Prize finalist thing last year, my favorite column that I wrote last year actually was about sports. I went to the worst ever game in baseball history. The Angels, the worst franchise in baseball, versus the White Sox, which of course ended up having the worst record in professional in modern day baseball history, playing on a Wednesday afternoon at Angel Stadium. The announced crowd was 10,000. They were lucky if there was 5,000 people there, and the loudest people were like ninth graders all the way in the upper deck. I went with a group of White Sox fans, Kurt Squire. What's up, man? A professor at UCI, a friend of mine, and he's from Gary, Indiana, and so lifelong White Sox fan. And he's like, hey, you should come hang out with us. I'm like, only if I could write about it. They were so much fun, talking so much shit on each other, like on just who the hell's a White Sox fan? And they were just so funny. And of course, what ends up happening, they can't hold their lead. It goes back and forth. And in the bottom of the 13th, the Angels won it and poor White Sox lose. So that was my favorite thing. And then you ask about Kershaw. I've never hated Clayton Kershaw. I think he's a great player. He's a good Christian man. God bless him for that. But he would always choke during the World Series. So and during the playoffs against the Cardinals where you're at. So on Twitter, you would see this, and I knew what was going to happen. And my poor cousins, all Dodgers fans, like they were just so blind. So he would allow a run. I would just tweet Kerchoke. Then of course he'd allow another run. Kerchoke. It just got so bad. I got so much hate from Dodgers fans. I'm like, why are you hating on me for pointing out that Kershaw is choking and pointing out every single run? Oh, no. Then I remember there was a stat. God, was it on Fox, TBS? I can't remember, but someone was trying to point out that Clayton Kershaw was actually, really, despite his reputation, the greatest ever postseason pitcher. Give me a goddamn break. Whitey Ford has something to say about that, Or how about Grover Cleveland Alexander being drunk and mowing down the Yankees all the way through, and what was it, the 28 World Series or something? That's excellence. Madison Bumgarner and all that stuff, not Kershaw. And then I think when the Dodgers finally won the World Series, I'm like, okay, I'm not like Kershaw got his championship. I'm not going to make fun of him anymore. And to this day, people try to goad me Kershaw has just started to pitch again and we're not in the playoffs, and he didn't pitch in the playoffs at all last season, but they're not going to goad me. When I say I'm not going to do something anymore, I'm not going to do something anymore. So Kershaw deserves his Hall of Fame career. I felt bad. Like why couldn't Kurt Schilling or Roger Clemens be the choke artist? It had to be a nice guy like Clayton Kershaw, but you have to call it out for what it is.
That's funny. Yeah, I just had to give you a little grief on that. But we had a story for our Chicago writer, Sino Mendoza, had a story the other day, and I didn't know this, but yeah, you're right. The Chicago White Sox are literally the Mexican team.
Oh yeah, that was a great story, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Last year was like their first sellout of a midweek game in years, and on Mexican Heritage Night, and then this year Mexican Heritage Night, and it was funny because I read the story, then I'm on Facebook and I see my primos were at the game. People who don't know, Latinos and Mexican Americans, like there are a lot of Jaliscienses, a lot of people from Zacatecas
Yes.
in Chicago, and I tell people like anywhere where there was meat packing, we were there. We were the people, butchering, those cows and everything. So, there's and you look at narco corridos, right? Like how often do they mention Chicago and so there's a lot of Latinos there.
Oh yeah,
Where
my cousin. Sorry to interrupt, but my cousin Ray Ramon, we call him Raymond. He's an Angels fan, even though he grew up in LA. He's an Angels fan. Go figure. But he went to an Angels White Sox game a couple of years ago, and the Angels swept the White Sox. So El Maldito, he freaking busts out a broom and starts sweeping the aisle. And the only reason he didn't get killed was because he was with his cousins who are White Sox fans.
there you go. That's and I tell you what, White Sox fans are much different than Cubs fans in the sense that Cubs fans are happy generally and probably drunk,
Yeah.
whereas Chicago White Sox fans, when they're drunk, they're mean drunks. I still
Oh
remember
yeah.
the 2005 World Series in the game where the Pope was there. The
Game one.
a
Yeah.
fan, yeah, a fan pulled one of the Astros' wives. I won't bring up the player's name. He's in the Hall of Fame, but Craig Biggio's wife, they pulled her hair. Like you're there to watch you're there to watch your husband in the World Series, and some crazy Chicago White Sox fans going to pull your hair. Yeah, so they're much different crowd. But it's going to take a while. I didn't know you were a Cubs fan, but Nolan Ryan, Ricky Henderson, I've gotten to know Nolan Ryan really well. I think he's one of the greats. I'm a
Oh
little
my
bit older
God.
than you, so I
Our,
remember him as an
so,
angel.
yeah, no, sorry to interrupt. Our mutual friend Jesse from MLB, he introduced me one time to Nolan Ryan. It was after a game and the Rangers had just lost. It was against the Angels, and I'm like, you don't have to do it. But he's like, no, 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 it'll be good. So he's walking away. You could tell Nolan is upset. And so Jesse knows him and says, hey, a friend of mine just wants to meet you. And just really quickly. And I said, Mr. Ryan, I just want to tell you it's such an honor to meet you. You were one of my favorite players growing up. And he's polite. He's like, thank you so much for doing that. And then I told them, I'm just glad that you were able to prove Buzzy Bavasi wrong. And he just got this big smile on his face. Famously, of course, Buzzy Bavasi was the general manager for the Angels, who did not sign Nolan Ryan, saying, Nolan finished 18-16 that season in 1979 and said I could replace him with 9-8 pitchers. And he just got this huge smile on his face, said something, and then went off. I'm like, hey, you know what? I made Nolan Ryan smile. Ya acabé con mi vida. I'm good.
Yeah, I'll tell you one of my favorite Nolan Ryan stories because I've gotten to know him really well. To know Reed and know Don Sanders, who's his best friend, a big, probably the most important baseball man in Texas history. He's helped so many. UH's field's named after him. Sam Houston. So I've gotten to know them really well. But I tell you, I tell my kids I won't ever get autographs for you. But in spring training, I might tell you where they're going to come out of. So I told them where Nolan Ryan was coming out of. And my middle daughter was a big Nolan Ryan fan. Like she wrote an essay like he's the Texas hero, most important Texas hero in history. And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my. And she's at Yale, so she's a pretty bright kid. But they cornered him as he's walking out in spring training. And they're like, oh, Mr. Ryan, my dad's Jesús Ortiz. And then he stopped and they start signing. And she starts hanging her glove. And before you knew it, my wife had to stop her because she kept trying to hand him everything she could to get Nolan Ryan. They all have Nolan Ryan autographed baseballs. And he truly is one of the greatest figures in baseball history. And then Ricky Henderson, I covered him with the Mets, died way too young. And
Yeah.
you as a journalist will appreciate this. He was the worst person to cover because if you talk to him 30 minutes ago, he gave one answer. And then you find out, then you go talk to him 30 minutes, he gives you a completely different answer. You're like going, oh my Lord, Ricky, what is going on? But, God, may rest in peace.
Yeah.
Let's go down. We'd love to ask these questions. What advice would you give writers, especially Latino writers, who may want to be columnists one day or just want to be beat writers?
First and foremost, just don't write about Latino issues. Do not write about everything. Sam Quiñones, the legendary journalist, when I first started wanting to get into journalism, I sent emails to every Latino surnamed reporter I could find. This is 25 years ago. Sadly, there wasn't that many, and probably there was more numbers then in some ways than there is now. Very few responded to them. As Rubén Martinez, who's now mostly an author, but used to be a writer for LA Weekly, and still does essays more than anything. And then Sam Quiñones, and he said, and I asked him, how can I be a great Latino journalist? He's like, well, don't be a Latino journalist. Be a journalist, period. Do not let them pigeonhole you into just writing about Latino things. You should write about everything. Why can't you write about white surfers in Huntington Beach? Why can't you write about this, and that? So that's a biggest piece of advice. If you want to write about Latinos, sure. And yeah, I write about Latinos a lot, but guess what? LA is 50% Latino. Like if I wanted to just achieve, like if I wanted to tell what the city is right now, every other story would be about Latinos, and not every other story is about Latinos. You go with whatever the story is. And then if you want to be a columnist, and of course a columnist is allowed to express their opinions, a reporter is just supposed to just to tell the facts, nothing else. But I think the reason why they made me a columnist, everyone says, oh yeah, voice. You have to have a voice. You have to know how to write and be unique. Maybe, but I think what's more important is that I know what makes a story. I know I'm able to find stories that no one else is going to tell. I'm able to see things that other people are not going to be able to see. So your job as a young reporter is just to tell as many stories as possible, and really hone down or hone in on what makes a story, sharpen your gut to be able to tell those stories, and then just, work nonstop. I always preach the gospel of work, WERK. I'm sorry. I'm like, look, employers should not exploit you 1000%. You should be paid for all the work that you do. I agree with that 1000%. But it's like Gabriel Garcia Marquez said, journalism is not a job. It's a vocation. You should know that this job is on call 24/7. You should know that stories are all around you, and you should really not turn off your journalism mind just because you're not on the clock anymore. When I'm out eating, when I'm out hanging out with my friends, even before I'm going to sleep, I'm thinking about stories. And I'm not the best writer. I'm not the best reporter, but I think of story ideas like few other people do. That's what I will say. That is my advantage over most other people. If I have an advantage of all, yo también no me voy a hacer así, but like there's better writers than me. There's better reporters than me. But in terms of just like looking at ideas and having the grand scope of things, that's the one talent I have really that has allowed me to have a career for 25 years.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. And I love soccer. When I left the Long Beach Press Telegram, they do these going away pages. And
Yeah.
It was funny because the headline was Ortiz to cover baseball, comma. Isn't he a soccer guy? Yeah, because I played soccer in Long Beach City. And I love soccer. I know soccer. I coach soccer. But at that time, I knew that not many people in the country were watching MLS.
Yeah.
And I want to make my name as a Dodgers writer. I thought I could help. And being bilingual and being able to write in English, I thought I could make a name for myself covering baseball. And then, sometimes you get other writers that are like, oh, Jesus only focuses on the Latinos. And one of the greatest compliments I got this year was when people, I got a call from the Hall of Fame, vice the Hall of Fame, a text. He's like, Jesus, Billy Wagner just gave you some love on his during his press conference. Like the first question he answered to the national media included my name. It's like, oh,
wow.
How did you do with this? And he's like, well, some people that helped me was Jeff Bagwell, Craig Biggio, Reed Ryan, the former president of the Jesús Ortiz. And I said, "Oh, thanks for letting me know." But I had already talked to Billy, so I wasn't on that press conference because I was writing. And then I told my friend, I said, "It's funny because a lot of people would say, 'Oh, Jesus, like he only focuses on Latinos,' but then the people I've been closest to in baseball were not necessarily Latino, like Billy Wagner, Roy Oswalt, Jeff Bagwell, obviously Edgardo Alfonso, Venezuelan, and Armando Benitez, Dominican, and Moises Alou, Dominican. But the ability to be able to relate to everybody is so important with writers. So I always tell writers, I grew up one of the few Mexican families in a predominantly black area, so I could relate and I could understand when I'm talking to an African American athlete. Um, but I've been in clubhouses and I always found something to connect with the sources. You know, like Dennis Cook, like country guy from Texas, Pat Mahomes, the
Yeah.
dad of Patrick Mahomes. They're in the same bullpen, and I would talk about A&M with Pat Mahomes' dad, and then I would talk about Texas and A&M football with Dennis Cook. Always find something to identify and build a rapport, and then ask questions. So I always love to find out like how other writers do their work. But yeah, you're right. Like it's important for Latinos to know, especially if you want to write English, like that don't be pigeonholed. Don't only focus on Latino issues. At our Esquina, we've built it and it focuses on Latinos, but it's different. It's a company that focuses specifically on that. But I did that like after 20 years in the industry.
Yeah.
The next question is, go ahead.
Oh no, no! Hey, come on! I want to praise you and what you've created. Yes, it is about Latinos, but it is telling stories that no one else is looking at on a national level. You really have to be focused, very, very specific. I mean, and I feel proud. You know, I've been reading you folks forever. I've been listening to the podcast that's come out. I love it. I love everything you folks do. Like that, I've meant to text you about that White Sox. The White Sox Latino Appreciation Day, just because I thought it was so well written and just so cool. But I just don't remember like you folks are always looking. There's so many stories to tell. Like my connection or my tip that I gave you, of course, was about Sebastian Castro at University of Iowa, where I'm watching this game, and here's this kid Castro, like what was he, a safety I think or defensive back, yeah, but making interception, all stuff. I'm like, oh, this guy's cool. So I text you like, hey man, do you know who this guy is? And you're like, no. And then you do not only do this great profile on him and you get this great story, his background and all that, then he starts becoming a thing. And you're the only person in the national media. Of course, Iowa media, of course, knows who he is, but on a national level, like you're really boosting him up. So, and though, yes, you're focused just on Latinos, but you are telling stories showing Latinos in all sorts of different ways, and like in softball, as executives, as like going into music, going into football, because the rest of the national media, when they think about Latinos, they just want to think about foreign baseball players, boxing, of course, not well, some basketball, soccer, of course, but it's so limited. But you really show, hey, you know what? Latinos are like, we're sports people. We're everything. We're all around. We're executives. We're broadcasters. So that's why I love Areskina so much. And I'm so happy that you folks are just keep growing. I love it. So anyway, that's my plug for you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you saying. I'm gonna tell you a funny little story. Percy Llamas, she's the slugger, freshman slugger for Ole Miss. She was such a badass that in the Women's College World Series, her third time up, she had driven in the Ole Miss's first run against Oregon, driven in Ole Miss's second run. They walked her to put the tying run on base because they didn't want to face her. This is a freshman, and I reached out to her to Ole Miss, and they set up the interview, and then she saw something where we talked about. I said, "Hey, I'm from the LA area. Where are you from?" And she tells me, and she's near Riverside. And I said, "Oh, I'm from Linwood." And she lit up. She goes, "Oh, my grandma's in Southgate." Then I talked to her mom.
Wow.
But listen to this. I talked to her mom. I find out that her mom's brothers went to elementary, junior high, and high school with me, and all Linwood schools, and then turns out my sister really knew the second brother in the family well, and we're texting, and I love it
Wow.
because and another story, the Jaime Jaquez one was our first really viral story,
Yeah.
and and I tell this story because, and not to pick on the LA Times, but the fact that the LA Times had to kind of like quote part of our story showed why Areskina is so important, because this is a guy who's now in the NBA, but at the time he was a sophomore. He's from Camarillo, and the LA Times hadn't done a full profile on him. And now he's going to the NCAA tournament. It's COVID. You're like, oh my.
Lighting it up.
And we do this. Caleb Sanchez, the Columbia quarterback, the quarterback from St. John Bosco. And I talk to the parents all the time, the dad all the time. And after he signed with Columbia, it was like 10 o'clock at night over here in Houston. And I get the call. He goes, Jesus, I want to thank you for highlighting my son. I really think that helped get a scholarship, because a lot, and then there's this other kid, Marquis Gallegos, who's going to be a sophomore, probably true freshman at USC. And they tell me about all the things that Latinos deal with when they're trying to be recruited for major college football. They find out you're Latino, and then they automatically deduct some speed time from you. And Mark, great stories, but this Latino All-American team that we did,
That was awesome.
Peyton Woodyard's mom sent me an email. She said, Jesus, dear Mr. Ortiz, I loved your Hispanic Latino All-American football team. I wanted you to know about my son. My husband's African American, but I'm Mexican. My dad's from Chihuahua, and I think he should be on your team. And that, when I talk to people about Areskina, is so important because, as you know, the diaspora of Mexicans is so big. It's African American, it's Asian American, it's white, and it's brown like me, and we're everywhere. And every once in a while, just yesterday, right? A Mexican Filipino American won the U.S. Open. We are everywhere, and that's why our Areskina continues to grow. We have a knock on wood, do a little prayer, because I know you've been there. We're so close with this doc that we're working on, and that the company that we've been talking to is already doing the sizzle reel to present to a couple of people. It's hard to tell our stories because sometimes people don't see value in them. You could show them the numbers, and now there are enough comps that people are like, oh, okay, I want in. I so, but I think it's important to highlight folks like you who are making a difference, who we need to hear, because sometimes, unfortunately, our gente, if a white person or a black person points out our wrongdoing, they always pull out the racist, you're against Latinos. But when the De Leons make ASSES out of themselves, you have to call them out. And when our gente has to call out our own gente, and that's what you're that's why you're there. That's your job.
My job again is to call the bad in the world and to celebrate the good. The old journalism adage: comfort the afflicted, afflict the comfortable. I did not join journalism to be popular. I did not join journalism to like get people to say nice things about me. I joined it because I had a passion for storytelling. And when I joined the OC Weekly, they were not telling the Orange County that I knew, not just the Latino part, but the Muslim part, the Vietnamese part, the just the more working class Anaheim, Santana part. And now with LA Times, look, the Times, hating the Los Angeles Times is the easiest game in town. Heaven knows I have had critiques about it, and we'll just leave it at that. But day in, day out, my colleagues at the Times, they tell such amazing stories. You mentioned Dylan. Dylan always gets raked across the proverbial coals by sports fans. Stick to sports, blah, blah, blah. Give me a break. Dylan is telling the stories of Los Angeles. And Dylan, again, like, you want to talk about angles that no one else can do. And what an LA guy, half Salvadoran, half Japanese sports guy who can talk to Shohei in Japanese. Like, that is, and this is not just to put Dylan, like, just reduce him to his ethnicity or what he talks. He's a great reporter, period. But you take those advantages and run with it. And so that's what Areskina is doing. I know this is not a podcast about how great Areskina is. It's supposed to be a podcast about me, but I don't care, because I just think, I mean, you say this podcast is to highlight Latino excellence, and that's what you folks are doing, highlighting Latinos whose stories really otherwise would not be told, even in their own backyard. And especially to sports, sports and representation especially is so important to me, because how many stories are out there? Like when I was going to Anaheim High, longtime football powerhouse, and then as it became more Latino, it started getting, like, the division started getting lower and lower and lower and lower. So by the time that I graduated, the team was like 95% Latino. Our quarterback, Luis Gomez, at a point, he had the high school football record in Orange County for most passing yards. Like Jesús Acevedo, who's from Humulquillo, the same rancho that my dad's from, star wide receiver, went for 1 year at the University of Idaho, work out, all. And so when you said, like, it's harder for Latinos to be recruited in football, it's absolutely true. How many great players are you seeing coming out of, like, Southgate or the South High School? I don't know the high schools out in Southgate, but all of that. But we Latinos, we love our sports. We do not see enough of ourselves up there going into the upper ranks historically. Pero está cambiando with Caleb, with all these players. The guy that, I don't remember all the names, but, I read the stories. The guy was at the University of Miami, the Cubano kid who was a quarterback there, the guys playing at Texas A&M, the guys, and these are the major programs. And then the smaller programs, it just makes me happy. Like when I get the Areskina newsletter, I just get happy, because I'm like, you know what? I'm going to learn some things right now. And me as a reporter, above everything, I love to learn things. Tell me a story that I don't already know.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that. And that's what, Anthony Banda, the reliever for the Dodgers. I told MLB when we were talking, I said, we're telling stories about guys that aren't being written about. And then the guy gets to the World Series, takes off his shirt, and becomes like, everybody wanted to know, like, and you can see the numbers because you see people clicking on this story, because all these girls are probably going, who's this Banda guy for the Dodgers? and that's what it's all about. Hey, I know you're busy. I will ask you one last question, then I'll finish with a sentence that I want you to say. Alex Padilla, how will history remember him, and how important is he to LA, to California, and to the country now? Because I think he's the first one that really is going to step up in this era against Trump.
I mean, look, Alex Padilla is a senior U.S. senator for California, the first ever Latino senator of California, the biggest state in the union. He is the architect of one of these political machines, the San Fernando Valley political machine, was a council member, first Latino council president, also youngest LA City Council president, period. State assembly member, state senator, Secretary of State, has never been involved in any scandals. Even though Nuria Martinez, one of the people on the tape leak scandal, was his homegirl, he immediately kicked her out and said, you have to resign. Like, it is all there. And now, and this is what I tell people, Alex, I mean, freaking guy's a genius. You don't go to MIT and not be a genius. I'm sorry. Like, I went to Chapman University and then UCLA. Nothing against Chapman, it's better now, but I went to Chapman when they would accept anyone. No way was I going to get to MIT, let alone UCLA. I went to UCLA for grad school. So Alex being at MIT, being an engineer for Hughes when he came back, and then running political campaigns at 22, already genius, already legacy secured. But for him, and by the way, the last person who would ever try to pull a political stunt is Alex Padilla. He is even-keeled, he's passionate, but he's kind of soft-spoken. So for him to be so angry about what the Trump administration is doing when it comes to these deportations, to try to crash a press conference, and it's not even crashing a press conference. My God, your entire half of your life has been press conferences. You know how it goes. Sometimes people just come in and yell something, and then they'll be like, either the polite thing is to just let the person tell the question, then answer it. You don't freaking get security and pull them unless it's an actual emergency. And this wasn't. Everyone in that, I'm gonna excuse the FBI agents. I'll say that they probably didn't know who Padilla was. I get that. But Christy Noam did. Bill Asaley did. You don't get into that part of the building without security clearance already. So you know it's not going to be just some rando coming off the street. So for him to be treated like that, nothing that the Trump administration or Republicans can do to slime Padilla for what he did is gonna take away from the truth that Alex Padilla dared question the Trump administration and got humiliated for it, but yet he still stands strong and tall. And if you know Alex, he's a tall Mexican. He's probably the tallest Mexican you'll ever see next to Lorenzo Mata.
All right. Well, that's great. Hey, you're listening to the Latino Excellence Podcast with Los Angeles Times columnist Gustavo Arellano, author, tortilla expert, just one of the best writers, one of my favorite authors, as I told him probably 15 years ago. Gustavo, I'll ask you to finish this sentence and make this sentence. We're asking everybody on this podcast, Latinos should know. I would say Latinos should know it's okay to embrace your greatness. What would your sentence be?
Latinos should know it's never easy, nor should it be easy, because it was never easy for our parents, especially those of us who grew up with immigrant parents. So embrace the grit, embrace the hustle, embrace the work with an E. And so that's why at the end, Latinos should know it's never easy, and honor those who made, it's never easy, but honor those who made the road before you easier. Even though it's not easy, it was even harder for the people before you. So embrace all of that.
Gustavo, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I disagree with you on your In-N-Out take.
In-N-Out's overrated.
Guy. No, I'm joking. I agree with you on In-N-Out being overrated. I'm a Whataburger guy, but really I'm a Tams guy. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with us. I really appreciate it.
Gracias. And just in case you didn't know, I actually finished the story while we were talking, and Jesus was seeing that, but just to let the audience know.